Why did they look at her like she didn't belong? The helicopter dust hadn't even settled, yet already the stares cut sharp. Men with dirt-scarred hands and sunburned faces paused mid-motion as she stepped down. Small frame, calm posture, hair pulled tight like discipline itself. She moved like she knew this land. But they only saw what they wanted to see. Some newcomer, some admin, some woman who didn't belong among warriors. Eva Rostova said nothing. She only tightened her grip on two heavy Pelican cases and walked through the chaos of rotor wash and barking engines like a ghost. No one bothered to salute. Not yet. The mountain stood jagged, ancient, indifferent. Dust scraped across the forward operating base like it had claws, clinging to skin, to gear, to souls. War here wasn't loud and heroic. It was slow, grinding, and hungry. It took pieces of people long before bullets ever did. Eva didn't flinch. She'd seen hunger before. A different battlefield, different accents, same rules. Inside her, something steady whispered, "Just do the work." A platoon of infantry watched her pass, their laughter blunt and careless. "Look at that new supply chick," one muttered, boots propped against an armored wheel. "Hope she brought filing cabinets. Wouldn't want her to get hurt," the other snorted. She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge. Silence was sharper than any retort. Silence cuts pride faster than blade. And somewhere inside that silence they squirmed, though they didn't know why. Eva reached the supply container. Clean, locked, untouched, her sanctuary. She punched in a code with the precision of someone who didn't forget numbers, not when forgetting once had cost lives. The lock clicked, a soft metallic heartbeat. And then, "Hey, Master Sergeant," a deep voice boomed. A shadow leaned on her doorway, big, confident, amused. Sergeant Rhino Davies, the kind of soldier who thought volume was leadership and muscle was proof of purpose. "You need a hand with those boxes." His smirk was slow, lazy. "Wouldn't want you to break a nail before you sign your first form." She paused, then turned. Her eyes found his. Still calm. A look that didn't fight, didn't argue. Just weighed him and dismissed him. She returned to her cases, stacking them inside with mechanical precision. The dismissal hit him harder than any insult. Davies' smirk cracked. "This ain't kindergarten, lady," he muttered to her back. "Out here real things happen." No reaction. Not even a breath wasted. He waited for her to rise to it, to defend herself. She didn't. And nothing feels more like weakness to insecure men than quiet strength. He walked off, irritated without understanding why. Eva exhaled, long and quiet. She didn't judge them for misunderstanding. The world had trained them to underestimate quiet people, to assume loudness meant capability, to think scars mattered only when visible. Let them believe it. Silence was safer. Silence was freedom. She opened her laptop. Logistics manifest, missing medical supplies, ammunition shortage, fuel misallocation, a base bleeding out not from battle but from neglect. She rolled up her sleeves. Paperwork wasn't paperwork here. It was the difference between someone making it home and someone going home folded in a flag. Her work was war, just quieter. But outside, laughter lingered. Voices she didn't yet know. Voices who didn't yet know her. And there, beneath it all, a familiar ache pressed faint against her ribs. Not fear. Not anger. Loneliness, a soldier's constant companion. People forget, the quiet ones don't lack emotion. They just learn to survive without witnesses. She kept typing. Minutes later, footsteps thudded outside. A briefing call echoed across the fob. She stood, adjusted her uniform, and walked toward command, not rushing, not hesitating, moving with purpose that didn't need to be announced. Inside the tent, a digital map glowed cold blue. Officers leaned over intel screens. Radios crackled with clipped urgency. War buzzed in the air like static before lightning. Colonel Madson spoke without looking at her. Master Sergeant Rostova, supply oversight on tomorrow's convoy. Medicals, comms, transport signatures. Ride in command vehicle. Do not interfere with operations. He finally looked up, eyes already stiff with assumption. You're a passenger, understood. Understood, sir. No ego, no defensiveness. Only obedience that wasn't weakness, just clarity. Orders mattered until they didn't. Behind her, Davy snorted. We'll make sure she doesn't get lost. A few soldiers chuckled. She didn't, because she wasn't here to win respect. Respect from the ignorant wasn't respect, it was noise. Still, as she walked away, part of her felt it, the sting of being unseen, the small, human ache of being misjudged before being known. But she breathed it out. Let them underestimate her. Quiet storms do not announce themselves. They break the world in silence. And somewhere far up in the mountains, the wind shifted like it sensed what was coming. Something waited out there. Something she felt before she could explain. A pulse in her bones, a warning wrapped in instinct. Danger breathes. And she had learned long ago to listen for its first whisper. Why did her instincts feel louder today than ever before? It wasn't fear, not panic, something quieter, older, like a ripple beneath calm water. She stood in the dim light of early dawn as soldiers loaded the convoy, fuel fumes thick in the air, steel clanking, boots stomping. Their voices rose in scattered jokes, stretching confidence like armor over nerves they refused to admit they had. To them, this was routine. Another run through the mountains. A supply line, boring, necessary, predictable. But Eva knew patterns, and she knew when a pattern was about to break. She checked her rifle methodically, not because she expected to fire it, but because diligence was a habit woven into her bones. Hands steady, motion silent, she slid the bolt forward with the ease of muscle memory older than her assignment here. She wasn't supposed to need it. Supposed to. She felt eyes on her again, not curious now, uneasy. The armorer still replayed her flawless weapon breakdown from the night before, a precision too sharp, too ingrained. It lingered in his expression like a puzzle piece that didn't fit the picture he'd been given. But no one said a word. She climbed into the command vehicle. Lieutenant Ferris sat rigid up front, trying to appear unaffected by the gravity of leading a convoy when his shoulders betrayed the strain. Young, greener than he wanted anyone to know. His jaw clenched as he triple-checked his comms, fingers tapping with barely masked tension. Rhino slammed his gear into place opposite her. His leg armor clinked, his voice already loud. Keep your straps tight, Master Sergeant. Don't want you floating out if we hit a bump. A ripple of laughter from the platoon net. She didn't respond, not because she was above it, though part of her was, but because unnecessary speech wastes oxygen in vehicles like this. Silence can command more than words ever will. The convoy rolled out. Engines rumbled like ancient beasts waking. Tires crushed gravel. The base gates slid open with a long, metallic groan, like the world itself warning them not to leave. They pushed into mountains born from tectonic violence and time's patience, sharp ridges, endless valleys, canyons carved not by water but by war after war after war. Eva scanned terrain through narrow ballistic glass. Sunlight broke slow over distant peaks, painting them copper, then gold, a beauty that made the violence waiting in the shadows feel crueler. Nature here wasn't kind. It wasn't even neutral. It was indifferent in a way that made human drama feel small. But human drama kills just the same. Her gaze settled on a patch of rocks, nothing obvious, just off, disturbed dust pattern, a ridge of earth too new, a stone angled in a way erosion wouldn't allow, little things, tiny inconsistencies that spoke louder than any shout. She leaned forward, slow, controlled. "Lieutenant," she murmured, "recommend we halt convoy." Ferris stiffened. His pride bristled immediately. She could see the calculation, a logistics NCO giving tactical advice. In front of his men, his authority already felt fragile. He couldn't afford to be seen bending to her now, not in his mind. On what grounds? His voice had false steel in it. A pattern doesn't match the terrain. A pattern, Rhino echoed, scoffing into his mic. She's reading rocks again. Someone snorted. Someone muttered, "Geology club incoming." Ferris' voice hardened. "Maintain speed, stay with plan." Eva didn't fight, didn't argue. Not yet. But something inside her coiled. A memory flashed, not visual but visceral. The smell of burning sand, a radio cutting to static, men screaming under collapsing walls, and a different lieutenant, confident until the moment confidence turned into casualties. That was the past, the one she never spoke of. The canyon closed around them, narrowing limbs of earth pressing close like jaws. Shades swallowed the vehicles. The hum of engines suddenly felt louder than thought, louder than heartbeat. She saw it then. A flash. Sunlight kissing glass where no glass should be. She leaned forward again, voice dropping lower, colder. "We need to stop." No one listened. She sensed it before she heard it, the stillness before a storm, that breath the world takes right before violence erupts. Instinct whispered, "Brace." Then the world exploded. A detonation ripped through the lead striker, fire and steel erupting into sky. The earth shook. Sand leapt. Metal screamed. A second blast shredded the rear vehicle, RPG streaking, then impact, then chaos. For a heartbeat no one moved. Shock-paralyzed breath froze sound. Then hell arrived in sound and flame. Machine gun fire rained from the heights. Bullets carved sparks off armor. Ricochets whined like angry hornets. The canyon became a death funnel, stone walls funneling noise into something feral. Ferris choked, then slumped. Shrapnel glinted in his helmet's shattered visor. Blood spattered his gear. Silence stole him before fear could reach his face. Rhino yelled, body jerking, bone and blood rupturing as a round punched through plate's edge. His scream cracked high, raw, a sound that stripped away ego and left only humanity. Radio channels erupted, half orders, half panic, mostly noise. Eva didn't flinch. She moved. "Tourniquet," she snapped, dragging Rhino by his vest, ignoring his curses, his pain, the weight. Hers was not the frantic strength of adrenaline. Hers was trained, intentional violence of motion. She cinched the band tight, twisted, locked. His blood slowed. His breaths didn't. He stared at her, confusion flooding pain. Fear tasting like disbelief. The world he built, of assumptions, of superiority fracturing. "Stay conscious," she ordered. Then she grabbed comms. Fingers flicked switches, seeking signal through static. No good, jammed. "Fine." She switched to the internal speaker, voice sharp as a blade. "Cease fire, conserve ammo. Sectors cover only, spears 50 cal now." No hesitation now. Her voice didn't ask. It commanded. Boots scrambled, bolts clacked. Breath steadied across the vehicle. The private manned the turret, trembling but listening. Through thermal optics she scanned. Ghost world rendered in whites and blacks. Heat blooms, enemy positions tucked near rocks. One reloading RPG, another shifting MG barrel, another calling orders. Not amateurs. Not villagers with rifles. Professionals plan positions. Overwatch kill zones. "You see the hot boulder left ridge," she murmured to Spears. "Yes, yes, ma'am." "Not ma'am, Master Sergeant, fire 5, adjust 2 up." The .50 cal thundered. Rounds tore rock, then flesh. One enemy nest silenced. She pivoted turret line. Next ridge, short burst. Gunfire again, precision through chaos. Outside, Tanaka's squad was pinned, sand kicked around them. Their curse-filled breaths barely masked fear. She toggled vehicle loudspeaker. Tanaka, barrel left, bound to lead hull, go when I say. He hesitated. That old ego flickered, but terror drowned it. Copy. Move. They ran, stayed low, ate dust and fear, but they moved. She covered them with fire, directing bullets like chess pieces. This wasn't adrenaline. This was memory, old instincts sliding back into command like a spine realigning. She saw mortar crew assembling, saw enemy commander higher ridge, radio in hand, saw future death rolling toward her men if she did nothing. She needed a sniper. She had a rocket. She grabbed AT-4. Spear stared, that's too far. Brace for backblast. Rhino, pale and shaking, croaked, you don't know that weapon. She didn't answer. She simply aimed, not at man, but at trajectory, arc, wind, drop. Every calculation silent but sure. She exhaled slowly, steady, and fired. Smoke streaked, war paused, time held breath. Impact. Stone erupted, bodies thrown, command cut. Silence fell, not of peace but shock. The ambush shattered. Her voice filled the quiet like law. Establish perimeter, casualty triage, ammo count. Nobody fires without sightline. Soldiers obeyed, not because she yelled. Because suddenly they understood. And respect born in terror becomes devotion faster than rank ever could. Dust settled slowly, like ash after a funeral pyre. Somewhere in her chest, something old stirred, recognition she hated. The battlefield still knew her name, even when she tried to forget hers. Nightingale. A shadow legacy whispered through special operations circles. Extraction ghost. Operator's last hope. Myth soldiers joked about so they could pretend they didn't need her. She swallowed memory down. Duty first, feel later. Always later. She checked Rhino again, his breath ragged but alive. He looked at her, not mocking now, but small, bewildered by his own vulnerability. You, he whispered, what are you? Her gaze flicked to him, neutral, flat. I am a master sergeant, focus on breathing. But she felt the question too, felt the weight of it settle like dust in her ribs. What was she now? This quiet life she'd tried to build, paperwork, schedules, supply routes, it never really let her leave who she used to be. Maybe warriors don't retire. Maybe they just wait. Radio crackled suddenly, jamming lifted, desperation from base breaking through. Kestrel actual to convoy status, respond. She took the mic, voice calm as winter water. Kestrel actual, this is Nightingale. Silence on channel, then static breath, fear, recognition. Copy Nightingale, QRF inbound, hold position. She returned equipment to cradle, no emotion in her face, but her pulse remembered the rhythm of war. Soldiers stared now, not with doubt but awe, guilt, realization. She did not bask in it. Respect earned in death's presence is not a prize. It's a burden. Minutes later, the wounded lifted, guns secured, perimeter strong, and she stood again in dust-filled light, breath deep, body steady. Her hands trembled once, only once when no one looked. Because heroism isn't power. It's cost. And she had paid before. She would pay again. The wind shifted through the canyon, soft, cold, a whisper across stone like a tired prayer. Not all battles are fought. Some are carried. She inhaled. Then quietly, simply. Next tasks. Because survival wasn't the end. It was the beginning. How do you return to normal when war just reminded you who you really are? The rotors hadn't even faded yet, but the silence that followed felt heavier than gunfire. Dust swirled around the landing zone as the Black Hawks lifted, taking the wounded, leaving ghosts. Soldiers stood in tight knots, quiet now, like boys who had once shouted on a playground and suddenly discovered the world was larger, crueler, less impressed by their noise. Eva stepped down last, boots hitting gravel like they had a lifetime ago, in a different country under a different sky. The air smelled like diesel, earth, blood-soaked bandages drying in medevac bags, a smell she thought she'd forgotten. It had never really left. She kept her face blank, her posture straight. Let them stare. Let them try to understand what they'd witnessed and fail, because they had no frame of reference for someone who could kill like that but carried herself like a librarian. Silence followed her, not the mocking silence of ignorance, but the reverent silence of realization. Rhino, pale on a stretcher, watched her from under sedated haze. Shame sat on him heavier than the bandages. Men like him only learned humility through pain, through reality forcing its way into their armor. He wanted to speak, to apologize again, but morphine dulled his tongue. She didn't spare him a look. Mercy wasn't comfort, it was dignity. Let him keep what little he still held. Colonel Madson walked toward her, shoulders squared as if bracing for judgment. The wind caught the edges of his uniform. Hard man, harder pride. Yet his eyes, the eyes betrayed him. They carried regret. Awe, a crushing weight of I misread the battlefield, I misread a soldier. He came to attention, boots slammed together into the dirt. And then he saluted. Slow, intentful, heavy with the kind of respect that changes a man's voice forever. She didn't ask for it, didn't acknowledge it more than protocol required. She returned the salute with crisp precision. Master Sergeant, he said quietly, voice stripped of authority and left only with honesty. Thank you. She held his gaze for half a second, long enough to acknowledge the gravity without accepting the emotion behind it, then turned. The world didn't owe her gratitude. Gratitude was a weight, and she had carried enough. Inside her supply container, she shut the door and let the silence settle. The metal walls hummed with generator vibrations. Outside, life returned to normal rhythms, trucks revering, boots marching, radios buzzing. War doesn't pause, bases breathe through chaos. But here, inside this steel box, the world was still. She sat slow, mechanical, back straight, elbows on knees, eyes unfocused. So quiet she could hear her pulse again, not racing, not panicked, steady, trained. Too steady for someone who had been inches from death an hour ago. This was the part no one understood. Battle wasn't the hard part. It was the stillness afterward that could break a soldier. Her fingers rubbed the faint scar on her wrist, old stitching etched under skin like memory carved into bone. She inhaled through her nose, exhaled through her mouth. Tension left her shoulders by inches, not all at once. Years of discipline teaching the body to release after it survived. Not that it ever really released all of it. A soft knock tapped the metal door, once hesitant, respectful. She didn't call out, didn't rise, just waited. The door cracked open. Specialist Tanaka stood there, helmet tucked under arm, dirt streaked across his face like war paint faded by exhaustion. His shoulders hunched in a posture unfamiliar to infantrymen used to swagger. Today, humility sat heavy on him. Master Sergeant, he started, voice thin. Words stuck in his throat like debris after an explosion. She looked at him, not unkind, not inviting, just steady. When you told us to move, he swallowed, gaze dropping. I hesitated. Silence. He forced himself to meet her eyes. I won't hesitate again. There was shame there, but not self-pity, growth, the kind forged only under fire. Eva's voice was quiet, see that you don't. He nodded once and left, closing the door carefully as if afraid to disturb her air. She stared at the place he'd stood, breath slowing again. Leadership wasn't shouting. Leadership was being the anchor when others drowned in chaos. But anchors sink too eventually, quietly, without attention. Outside, the base moved on, helicopters rearmed, radios hummed, a new mission brief somewhere. Someone laughed nervously, trying to reclaim the world before the ambush. She rose, methodical again, and reached for her weapon case. Ritual steadied the mind. She field-stripped her rifle with the same reverence a monk might strip scripture. Metal clicked softly, familiar, grounding. And then another voice, familiar, rough but weaker than before. "Master Sergeant." Rhino stood outside the open door, leaning on crutches, face pale under fluorescent scars. A hospital gown barely concealed his vulnerability. No armor, no persona, just a young man who once thought muscle made him invincible. She didn't stop cleaning, didn't turn. He swallowed, "I'm sorry." His voice cracked on the word like it wasn't used to apology. "For everything I said, for doubting you, for," he broke, breath catching, "I didn't know." She looked up, not with pity, just truth. "You weren't meant to know." He shifted, uncomfortable not with pain but with humility. "I was wrong. You were young. A small mercy, a rare one. You did your job, now survive recovery." His eyes glossed. The battlefield had taken his certainty, his arrogance, but given him something harder earned. Perspective. He bowed his head, not out of protocol but respect, and shuffled away on unsteady legs. She finished reassembling her weapon. Barrel slid home, spring locked, slide racked, a mechanical prayer answered. The world outside dimmed as sun dipped behind peaks, bleeding orange into purple, then bruised twilight. Wind carried a chill, crisp enough to bite. She stepped out into the open air. Soldiers paused as she passed, not stiff, not fearful, but alert with a new kind of awareness. Once they looked through her. Now they looked around her as if the air shifted when she walked through it. She didn't change pace, didn't bask in it, didn't acknowledge it. Respect earned in battle isn't pride. It's a burden. A reminder of the bodies left behind. Near the motor pool, she spotted two soldiers arguing in hushed tones, not angry, scared. Their hands shook slightly around cigarettes, voices cracking with words like should've and what if. She didn't interrupt. Grief and shock need space to breathe before they can be molded into strength. At the infirmary tent, she paused. Through plastic flaps, she saw medics moving like ghosts over wounded bodies. Hands steady, movements precise. Lives hanging on threads held by human will. She respected them more than most fighters. Killing takes skill. Saving takes courage. She moved on. By the time she reached the far edge of the base, the wind had grown colder. High-altitude nights were unforgiving, stripping warmth fast. She welcomed it. Cold reminded you you were alive. Heat reminded you how easily life burns away. Stars emerged, sharp and indifferent. The same stars she'd stared at in deserts and jungles and foreign hills. Different wars, same sky. No matter where she went, the heavens refused to change. Maybe that's why soldiers look up after battle, not for faith, but for constancy. Her radio crackled lightly on her chest. Routine check-in calls, supply questions, someone requesting repair codes. Mundane, normal. Normal felt surreal. She leaned on a concrete barrier, letting her shoulders drop 1 inch, only one. Enough to release tension, not enough to show it. The quiet pressed like weight, but it wasn't loneliness now. It was acceptance. The ache didn't sting tonight, it settled like a companion she had stopped trying to outrun. Voices drifted from the barracks. Someone telling the story already. Animated half-whispers trying to capture calm precision, rocket trajectory. The moment silence turned to command. War stories always grow sharper in retelling. But legends don't live in fire. They live in aftermath, in quiet corners, in the breath someone takes when they realize they lived, in the look they give the person who helped them do it. Legends walk back to supply offices and fill out forms, while hands remember recoil and eyes remember heat signatures. Eva looked toward the horizon. No triumph, no pride. Just resolve. Tomorrow there would be manifests, inventory, fuel logs, plastic gloves and paperwork and numbers that meant lives again. War wasn't glory. War was logistics. And logistics won battles quietly while louder men took credit. She turned back toward the base, boots steady on gravel, breath even, heart steady. You don't choose to be a warrior forever. But sometimes the world chooses for you. And sometimes dignity doesn't roar. It whispers. It acts. It walks forward even when the world doesn't applaud. She walked. Night settled around her, cold and clean. The base lights flickered like small promises against the vast dark. And somewhere deep inside her, beneath the calm, beneath routine, beneath the soldier and the legend and the myth, a small tremor of something she rarely allowed herself. Not fear, not pride, not pain, but the faintest, quietest thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could still be human despite everything she had become. And hope is the most dangerous weapon a soldier can carry. What do you do when the life you buried tries to breathe again? Morning arrived cold and brittle, like metal left outside in frost. Soldiers stirred in half-sleep, boots scraping gravel, breath fogging as they formed up for another day pretending the world was predictable. Eva woke before dawn as always, no alarm needed. The body learns to rise before danger does. She sat on the edge of her cot, boots unlaced, elbows resting on her knees. For a long moment she didn't move, didn't reach for gear, didn't begin her day of lists and requisitions and pretending she was nothing but supply. She simply breathed, quietly steady, controlled. But there was a tremor beneath the stillness, like the smallest vibration in a glass before it shatters. Her fingertips brushed the undershirt patched with the symbol no one was meant to see, the spade and stiletto. Her hand stilled there, not grasping, just acknowledging. The past had teeth, and yesterday it bit down hard. A knock tapped once on the metal door. She didn't turn, didn't need to. There were footsteps she could identify on instinct now, the cadence, the weight, the way a man carried regret along his spine. Colonel Madson stood in the doorway, coffee steaming in a tin mug, uncertainty clinging to him like dust. "Master Sergeant." She glanced up, "Neutral, sir." He hesitated, a man built for command suddenly learning humility. "Walk with me." She rose without a word. Outside, the air burned cold in lungs, thin as truth at altitude. Soldiers saluted as they passed, awkward at first, then precise once she gave them nothing to question. Respect had replaced mockery astonishingly fast. War has no patience for fools. They stopped at the edge of the motor pool, watching mechanics work in silence on a remaining striker, welding sparks throwing brief constellations into the gray morning. For a while, Madson said nothing. It wasn't avoidance, it was awe struggling against guilt. Finally, soft, careful. "You could have told me." She kept her eyes forward. "Not my place. You saved my men. I did my job." "No," he shook his head, "you did far more." A pause stretched between them, cold wind tugging at uniforms, distant rotors chopping faint rhythm. Madson wet his lips like he was about to step on unstable ground. "Why here?" he asked quietly. "Why supply? Why disappear into manifests and crates when you could run half the theater?" Eva's jaw tightened, the question she avoided even in her own mind. Why run from the blade edge of her life? Why bury a legend under paperwork and quiet? She stared at the mountains, hard, unyielding, ancient like the choices she'd made. Because some wars don't end when you leave the battlefield. Some follow you in silence. She didn't say that. Instead, we don't get to choose where the army needs us. Madson studied her profile, eyes narrowing, not accusing but searching for cracks she refused to show. "You're not here by accident." "No," she agreed softly. "I'm here because someone thought I was safer on a clipboard than a rifle." "Were they wrong?" A breath caught just a fraction, but enough. She didn't answer. Silence answered for her. He exhaled, tone shifting. Command will ask questions after the reports about who you are, where you came from. She looked at him then, cold, still, eyes like steel rubbed smooth by time. They already know, or they chose not to. He flinched at the implication. The army always knows. It simply pretends not to when pretending is convenient. Madson nodded once heavy, respect solidified, if you ever want. I don't, quick, quiet, final. He didn't press. Good men don't push open sealed doors. They parted without ceremony. War doesn't waste sentiment. Back at Supply HQ, soldiers moved differently around her now. Not scared, but careful. Reverent. They greeted with crisp nods instead of smirks. The air carried weight, not mockery. Specialist Chen approached with inventory files, hands steady but eyes darting, as if trying to reconcile the person who checked bandage counts with the one who fired anti-armor weapons like sniper rifles. Status reports, Master Sergeant, he said, voice steadier than his hands. She skimmed them. 3 pallets missing from yesterday's manifest. His face flushed. We will find them. You will, she said, not harsh, simply truth. Responsibility was a form of care. Expectation was belief. He swallowed and nodded sharply. She continued reviewing supply chain failures with surgical calm. Fuel, ammunition, plasma. She worked like nothing had happened because letting yesterday show meant losing control. Control kept soldiers alive. Control kept ghosts quiet. Hours passed, fingers typed, eyes scanned. The world returned to numbers and logistics and the silent machinery of war behind the noise. Then voices outside, not mocking, not joking, whispering, low and unsure. She paused, listening. No, she's like some kind of operator. Did you see Tanaka's face? He swears she moved before the blast. Heard she pulled a pilot out of a crash a few years back. Nobody normal fires a rocket like that. I think she was trying to hide. Why would someone like that hide here? Why indeed? She closed her eyes just once, long blink, as if shutting out the world for a heartbeat. Because peace isn't hiding. It's survival. And some warriors just want to breathe without killing something. But peace is fragile when the world still needs your violence. The whispers faded as footsteps retreated. She returned to work, but her mind didn't settle. She remembered sand under her nails, blood under her boots, a radio voice crackling panic, a pilot screaming, night vision painting death in pale phosphorescence. She hadn't saved everyone that night. Memory pressed, heavy. Fingers trembled once before she forced stillness back into them. Not here. Not now. Not again. A sudden knock broke the thought like glass. The door swung open. Specialist Tanaka stood there, breath clouding from a run, face tight, voice controlled but urgent. Master Sergeant, Ops needs you. Colonel requested you personally. She stared. Why? His throat bobbed. Intel sweep found heat signatures on high ground 4 clicks out. Could be insurgents regrouping. They want your read. This base almost never asked supply for battlefield input. Yesterday changed rules. Eva rose, no sigh, no hesitation, motion smooth as a weapon being drawn. Outside, command tent buzzed like a beehive under threat, radios crackling, screens lit with drone feed. Madson leaned over a display, officers tight around him. He looked up when she entered. Relief flickered across his face, not weakness but recognition. When chaos edges near, call the quiet one who doesn't flinch. Master Sergeant, he greeted. She stepped beside him, eyes scanning drone imagery. Hot spots on ridge lines. Movement patterns disciplined, not scatter, not panic, something else. She studied the feed. Slow. Intent. Memory overlaying terrain with instinct map lines only years of survival could draw. They're not massing, she murmured. A captain frowned. Then what? They're probing angles, she finished. Watching us, testing response times. That's recon discipline, not retreat. Madson's jaw clenched. You think they'll hit again? No, her voice dropped. They're studying who responded yesterday, not what. Silence snapped tight. The room shifted. Men looked at each other with sudden weight. Me, she answered the unspoken. Madson exhaled through his nose. Then they know exactly who you are. They don't know, she corrected quietly. They suspect, but suspicion is enough to draw hunters. A ripple moved through the tent, fear, but also something more dangerous for command to ignore. Dependency. They needed her. And needing someone creates tension. Power shifts quietly. She felt it. She hated it. The captain swallowed. Then what do we do? Eva looked back to the screen, steady, cold, analytical. We act normal. We remain predictable. They expect a reaction. They don't get one. So you want us to pretend nothing happened? A lieutenant asked, incredulous. Yes, she said simply. For now, let them think they can map us. Madson nodded slowly, and when they move. Her eyes lifted to his, calm, deadly calm. Then we stop pretending. No threat in her tone, no bravado, just inevitability. Madson dismissed the room. Officers filed out quietly, glancing at her like she was gravity itself, felt not spoken. When the tent emptied, he lowered his voice. They're not done with us or with you. Enemies rarely are, she replied. You could request reassignment. I don't run. He studied her a long moment, but you did once. She froze, the smallest fracture of stillness, he noticed. Not from enemies, she murmured, from myself. A silence hung heavy, understanding, not pity. Then she turned to leave. Rostova, Madson said at her back, some ghosts don't stay buried. She paused, eyes closed, a breath like someone steadying a blade. I know. Outside, wind cut sharper. Clouds gathered over peaks like storm sentries. Temperature dropped, air thick with waiting. Soldiers moved around her like satellites around something they feared and trusted in equal measure. Her boots crunched frost. Her heartbeat stayed steady. Her mind didn't. No rest now. No returning to smallness. They knew she existed. And people don't leave legends alone. Not allies. Not enemies. Not ghosts. She walked back toward her container, but another feeling followed her this time. Not war, not fear. Recognition. She had tried to fade. Tried to build a quiet life out of logistics and discipline. But sometimes fate drags you back to the edge, not to break you, but to remind you who you are when the world is burning. And deep inside, beneath duty and discipline and exhaustion, a truth stirred like fire touching dry tinder. Once she had been unstoppable. Buried steel. Silent blade. Perhaps the world hadn't seen the last of that person. Perhaps she hadn't either. When did quiet stop meaning safety? Night crept fast over the base, swallowing the peaks in deep shadow. Floodlights flickered awake, casting long, hard beams across gravel and steel. Somewhere far off, a generator hummed like a tired heart. Boots scuffed in rhythm. Radios clicked. Orders murmured. The world pretended normalcy, an illusion soldiers cling to because truth is heavy. Eva moved through it like a ghost, returning to familiar territory she hoped she had left behind. Every step quiet, every breath measured, every muscle remembering a life she tried not to own anymore. She reached the perimeter fence, barbed wire glittering under harsh light, sandbags stacked like mute sentries. A young guard shifted as she approached. Private Morales, fresh-faced, too much hope in his eyes for a place that eats hope slowly. He straightened instantly. Even in, Master Sergeant. She nodded. Perimeter discipline looks good. Pride sparked in him, small and bright. "Trying to keep it tight, ma'am." "Master Sergeant," she corrected gently. He flushed. "Right sorry habit." She recognized the nervousness. He wasn't scared of her. He wanted not to disappoint her. That was more dangerous than fear. She scanned the ridges without a telescope. She didn't need one. Patterns, shapes, shadows. Her eyes ran calculations silently. No movement, but absence of threat never meant lack of danger. Sometimes the quietest nights hid the worst storms. Morales cleared his throat. "Is it true what they're saying?" She didn't answer. Let him find the courage to finish the sentence. "That you, used to do some kind of special work." Her face didn't twitch. "I do logistics." He nodded too fast. "Right, yeah, sure, of course." But he didn't believe that now, not fully. She walked away before the conversation could turn into questions. Questions led to stories. Stories led to memory. And memory was a battlefield she avoided more than any mountain pass. Inside her container again, she sat in the cold quiet. Metal walls held heat poorly, and the night seeped through like an old injury ache. She didn't turn on the light. Low light meant stillness. Stillness meant seeing thoughts clearly, dangerous but necessary. She closed her eyes. And memory came, uninvited. Sand whipping against her face. Helicopter flames cutting black sky. Voices on radio choked, terrified, desperate. "Nightingale, they're closing in." "I can't." "God, please, anyone." Her boots sinking into grit as she ran toward wreckage. Smoke choking. The smell of fuel and cooked desert. Cold breath in lungs despite heat. Hands reaching up from twisted metal. "Don't leave me, Nightingale, please." A round snapped past, singing inches from her ear. She fired without aiming. Reflex. Precision baked into muscle and fear. Pulled a pilot from a cockpit that was more corpse than machine. Dragged him through blood-spattered dirt as the world tried to erase them both. He survived. Another didn't. The scream still lived in her bones on some nights. She opened her eyes. The room was too quiet for comfort. Quiet meant thoughts. Thoughts meant ghosts. A knock startled the silence, sharp, hurried, not the hesitant tap of reverence. She stood immediately, hand brushing instinctively near her holster. The door swung open before she reached it. Sergeant Tanaka. Sweat on brow though the night air was cold. Eyes darting, breath uneven, as if he'd been running, not from distance but from thoughts he couldn't contain. "Master Sergeant, do you have a minute?" She motioned him inside. He entered, fidgeting like a man trying to stand still in a storm. "What is it?" she asked. He swallowed hard. "I can't sleep." Silence, not judgment, just space for truth to settle. "It keeps replaying," he continued. "The explosion, Ferris' face, Rhino screaming, the sound of bone, and I was." He choked. Emotion crept up his throat like a force he wasn't trained to fight. "I froze, I hesitated, and you." He shook his head. "You moved like you'd been waiting for it." "I didn't want to wait for it," she said softly, surprising herself with honesty. Tanaka blinked. She continued. "I don't wake up hopping for battle. I wake hopping logistics are enough, but hopping doesn't stop bullets." He exhaled shakily. "I thought being a soldier meant grit, muscle, loud confidence." He laughed bitterly. "You don't have any of that." She raised an eyebrow. He flushed. "I mean you don't posture, you don't command space. You just exist, and suddenly everything falls in line." "That isn't power," she murmured. "It's burden." He rubbed his eyes. "How do you sleep after something like that?" "I don't," she answered simply. His head snapped up. Surprise flickered into something like respect deeper than admiration, shared understanding. "We don't conquer fear," she added. "We carry it until it learns to walk beside us." He nodded slowly, breathing steadier now. Her calm regulated him like gravity. "Tomorrow," he said, voice firmer, "I'll be better." "Tomorrow," she agreed. You will be prepared. Tanaka straightened, saluted not sloppy but sharp, then left steps steadier than when he'd entered. When the door shut, she exhaled, not relief, more like exhaustion wearing discipline's clothing. She moved to the desk and opened a drawer. Inside was a small battered notebook, leather worn thin, edges frayed, no name on it. She never put names on things that mattered. Names can expose, objects can stay quiet. She opened to a page near the back, a list. People who didn't make it. Names, initials, a few short lines, who they were, what they joked about, the life they meant to return to. She added a new one. Ferris, eager to prove himself, deserved time to grow into command. She stared at the ink until it blurred, not weakness, not grief. Recognition. Every life saved cost another piece of her. Every command gave weight. Every legend kept alive meant a part of her stayed, buried somewhere she couldn't reach. Another knock, gentler this time. She didn't move, silence answered. But the voice through the door did what knocks couldn't. Eva. Her spine stiffened. The air in the room changed, pressure dropping like weather before a storm. That voice didn't belong to this base. It belonged to a chapter of her life no one here was supposed to read. Slowly she approached and opened the door. A man stood there, not a private, not a platoon sergeant, no rank visible, plain clothes that blended like shadow, calm eyes that saw too much. Been a long time, he said quietly. Her mouth went dry, a tiny tremor in her chest, recognition reluctant and sharp. You shouldn't be here, she said. He shrugged. Command sends who it trusts, and when your call sign hit the net, his gaze searched her face. They sent me. She didn't ask why, she knew. If Nightingale resurfaces, the world doesn't send paperwork. It sends ghosts to find ghosts. Walk, he asked. No. A tiny smirk, still giving orders even when you want to pretend you don't. She clenched her jaw. State your purpose. He didn't look away, didn't blink. They're coming back, same cell, reinforcements, different leadership, higher level. You want a battle, they took it personal. Silence fell heavy. You disappeared because you earned peace, he said. But peace isn't hiding, peace is borrowed time. And you think you can collect it, she asked, edge creeping into her tone. I think, he said softly, you're the only person in this valley who can keep these kids alive if they come again. Something twisted inside her, not pride, not fear. Duty. The kind that feels like chains, even when self-chosen. And if I refuse, she asked. He looked at her, not as a recruiter, not as a commander, but as someone who once stood shoulder to shoulder with her in shadow. You won't. Not threat, certainty. She hated that certainty, hated it because part of her recognized it too. He stepped back. Tomorrow, briefing at 600. She didn't reply. He turned, fading into dark like he came from it. She watched until even his footfalls vanished. Inside again, she shut the door gently, not to keep the world out. To hold herself together. She looked at her cot, her desk, her neat rows of manifests, the life she had tried to build. Quiet, simple, meaningful. Safe. Her pulse slow, breath steady. But behind steadiness, a truth pulsed like a heartbeat she couldn't silence. The world wasn't going to let Eva Rostova stay small. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't sure she truly wanted to anymore. The night seemed darker suddenly, not dangerous, just honest. Some people fight to live. Others live because they are built to fight. She didn't choose which she was. She only chose not to run from it tonight. She sat in the quiet, back straight, breath controlled, waiting for dawn, not with dread, but with acceptance. Because when fate knocks, refusing to answer doesn't make it go away. It only makes it louder. And tomorrow, the mountains would listen again. Why do the ghosts get louder when dawn arrives? Not when bullets fly. Not when danger breathes. but in the hush before the world wakes, when quiet should be mercy, not memory. The horizon bled pale gold into a sky still bruised from night. Frost clung to sandbags. Condensation fogged windows of armored vehicles lined like steel beasts waiting for purpose. Somewhere, a kettle hissed in a mess tent, and tired soldiers pulled jackets tighter against mountain cold. Eva stood outside long before reveille, breath forming steady clouds. She slept only in fragments, 10 minutes here, 15 there, eyes snapping open too easily. Old habits rooted deeper than muscles. She watched the perimeter through stillness, the way others might study scripture, not for comfort but for signs, movement, sound, rhythm. Something was coming. Her bones felt it before her eyes did. That sense veterans never articulate, because turning instinct into language makes it fragile. Boots approached behind her, she didn't turn. That's the posture of someone waiting for trouble, a voice murmured. She did turn then, slow, precise. The contact from last night stood beside her, hands in pockets, posture loose. Loose in the way only those trained to kill cleanly and quietly learn to hold themselves. "You're early," she said. He smirked, "So are you." Silence stretched between them, taut as tripwire. The sun crawled higher, lighting the edges of rooftops and razor wire in dull gold. "Intel confirmed what I said," he continued. "Movement East Ridge. Drones picked comms we can't decrypt. They'll test you." "Us," she corrected. "Not yet," he replied. "They don't care about me. They want to know if last time was accident or if Nightingale still lives." He watched her face for reaction. She didn't give one. "They'll hit soon," she said. "Not today, but soon." He nodded. "Your co wants you in the briefing room." Of course he did. Eva turned, heading toward command. But halfway there she slowed, eyes falling on a small group behind the motor pool. Young soldiers clustered around Tanaka and spears, faces intent, shoulders tight. Whisper training. Low conversation, no laughter. They were preparing without being told, fear shaping discipline. Tanaka noticed her and stood straighter. The others followed, instinct rather than protocol. "Master Sergeant," Tanaka said, not loud but solid. She studied them, their posture, their eyes, their readiness and the fear beneath it, not cowardice, awareness. Once she would have told them to stay in their lane. She was supply. They were infantry. Lines existed for a reason. But lines blur when death has visited. She stepped closer. "Sit." They obeyed instantly, forming a semicircle on gravel. Spears swallowed hard. Morales dropped his gaze out of habit, then forced himself to look up. They were learning. She crouched, not above them, not commanding, but level. "You want certainty," she said quietly. "There is none." Chests tightened. A truth like that always lands heavy. "You want to avoid fear," she continued. "You won't. Fear keeps you awake when complacency kills." Morales exhaled shakily, Spear's clenched jaw. Tanaka nodded once, jaw tense but eyes unwavering. "So what do we do?" Spears whispered. "We prepare, we stay alert, we move on discipline, not impulse, and—" She paused, they leaned in. "We trust each other." Silence, no speeches, no bravado, just truth offered like a blade, sharp, utilitarian, necessary. "Range in 15 minutes, she added. "You will shoot not to hit. You will shoot to decide, to think, to breathe with intent." They stood slowly, shoulders more grounded now, purpose replacing fear. She rose with them. Tanaka opened his mouth as if to speak, then stopped. His gratitude was wordless but present like heat. She stepped away. The agent ghost of her past watched with unreadable eyes. "You training them now," he murmured. "I'm preventing funerals." He studied her profile, searching again. He never stopped. "You're slipping," he said softly, "letting yourself care again." She turned her head fully, eyes locking with his. "Everyone breaks." He shook his head. "Not you." She didn't answer, Belief and truth aren't always the same thing. Inside the command tent, Colonel Madson stood over the map, coffee in hand, jaw set hard. He looked older today, guilt carved into edges of his posture, respect weighing on him like armor. "Master Sergeant," he said, "no condescension, no dismissal, just rank greeting rank with gravity." She stepped beside him. The agent stood a pace behind, shadow in plain sight. Madson pointed to the terrain. "Movement here, here, and here. Nothing heavy, scouts." "No," Eva corrected. "Not scouts, observers. They're mapping how we respond. They won't attack until they know what we fear." "And what do we fear?" Madson asked. "Losing control." Madson stiffened slightly, not at the intel, at the implication, but he didn't deny it. "You'll take point on counterprep?" he asked. A lifetime ago she would have accepted without thought. Duty reflex, mission reflex. Today she paused, not from doubt, from clarity. "I'll advise," she said. Madson frowned. "Advise?" She nodded. "They need you to lead. If I take command, they won't trust themselves next time. They'll wait for me. And if there is no next time for you here." She didn't blink. "Then they'll stand on their own." His eyes softened, frustration tangled with admiration. "You're not easy to work with." "Neither is war." He almost laughed, almost. "Fine, advise." Outside again, sunlight warmed the ground. Soldiers moved with purpose but not panic. Eva walked toward the range where Tanaka and the others waited, each step heavy, not with fear but inevitability. Halfway there, the agent fell into step beside her. "You're doing it again," he said quietly. "Doing what?" "Teaching, leading, connecting." He paused. "Becoming who you were." She slowed, turned her head, breath whiting cold air, eyes sharp but tired. "I don't want to become who I was." "Then don't," he said, "but you can't unbe what you are." She stopped walking. He faced her. Wind tugged at uniforms. The bass hummed around them, oblivious to the quiet war between past and peace. Finally, she asked the question she'd avoided, even in her own mind. "Why did they send you?" He didn't hesitate. "Because I know how to find you when you disappear, and because you listen to me when the world turns loud." "And when it's quiet?" she asked. He looked at her like silence was a battlefield too. "That's when you scare me most." She didn't flinch, didn't soften, but something inside her tightened, small, quiet, undeniable. "Human." She turned away. "Range," she said simply, walking. He watched her go, hands still in pockets, exhale long, as if bracing for a storm. At the firing line, soldiers waited, young faces marked by new fear and new steel. They straightened as she approached. "Today," she said, voice calm, "we learned to breathe in chaos." They listened, hung on each instruction, each word of discipline, because some leaders teach by command, others by example, but the rarest teach by survival. She corrected posture, adjusted grips, slowed their breathing until the noise inside them quieted. Between shots, one soldier whispered, "Master Sergeant." She didn't look away from the weapon she was adjusting. "Yes." "Were you scared?" The question landed like a weight. She didn't answer immediately. Silence stretched. Then finally, "Yes." A ripple of shock and relief through the group. If someone like her could fear, then fear wasn't weakness. It was part of the craft. She continued, voice low. "Courage isn't lack of fear. Courage is function in spite of it." They absorbed it like oxygen. Behind them, the agent watched quietly, not as handler or shadow, as witness. When she finished, she stepped back, letting them fire, letting them learn, letting them grow into soldiers who might one day no longer need her. That was leadership, not command. As she turned to leave, Tanaka called after her softly. "Ma'am." She paused, didn't correct him this time. "We're glad you're here." The wind carried the words to her, like warmth trying to reach a frozen place. She nodded once, small, controlled. then walked away before her face betrayed anything human. Back at her container, she opened her notebook again, not to write a name this time, but to stare at a blank page. Blankness scared her more than violence. Blankness meant possibility, and possibility meant future. She traced the edge of the paper, breath steady, eyes unblinking. For the first time since arriving, she wasn't thinking of battles fought. She was thinking of ones she might choose not to fight. And that terrified her more than ambushes ever could. Because warriors don't fear danger. They fear peace. They haven't learned to live inside. Outside, the mountains held their breath. Inside, Eva Rostova did too. How do you prepare for a storm you've already survived once and promised yourself never to face again? Dusk bled across the valley like a bruise spreading slow, purple along jagged peaks. The base glowed beneath it, warm lights, moving figures, the illusion of safety breathing through orderly chaos. Trucks rolled. Soldiers shouted. Someone played music from a tinny speaker like normalcy could be forced into existence. Eva walked through it quietly, boots whispering over gravel, a ghost among the living again. Word had spread. Not the truth, not the classified blood and shadows of her past, but the whispers, the glances, the unspoken acknowledgement that whatever she had been hiding, it wasn't small. Morales nodded when she passed. Spears stood straighter. Tanaka lifted his chin, steel in his spine now, strength borrowed first, now learned. They no longer looked through her. They looked to her. And that scared her more than the unseen men, gathering in the hills hunting vengeance. Leadership was a contract, silent, heavy, paid in soul, not rank. She hadn't signed it this time, yet somehow her name was still on the line. She stopped near the supply tent, watching soldiers load ammo crates. No wasted motion, no jokes today. They felt it too, danger's breath on the back of their necks, something coming, something watching. Not panic, not fear. Anticipation, the kind that lives between heartbeat and breath. The agent approached silently beside her. No greeting, no need. "They respect you," he said. "I didn't ask for that," she replied. "Respect isn't requested," he murmured. "It's earned, usually in pain." She didn't respond. Silence was safer than admission. "They'll come tonight," he added, voice low. Dust kicked on the eastern approach. Drones caught shadow movement on canyon line. She didn't tense. That had already happened internally hours ago, like a taut string ready to snap. Her voice was steady. "Command knows." "Yes, but knowing isn't understanding," he exhaled. "They think it's intimidation, a test. They don't realize it's a promise." "What do they want?" she asked. "You," he said without hesitation. Her jaw tightened. "They don't know my name." "They don't need it. They remember your work." "Work?" The word tasted like metal on her tongue, like blood memory, like the kind of history no one escapes without losing something vital. She began walking. He followed, steps in sync like old patterns resurfacing without permission. "You can still leave," he said quietly. "No shame. You earned retirement 100 times." She didn't look at him. "I don't run." "I know," his voice softened. "That's what I'm afraid of." Afraid. Strange word coming from him. From someone who once stood beside her in the silent wars, the kind fought in alleyways and abandoned buildings, far from medals and headlines. They passed the comms tower. 2 soldiers glanced over nervously, pretending they weren't watching her. She slowed. "Why warn me?" she asked, eyes forward. "Why not just let the military handle it?" He hesitated, rare, because they don't know what's coming. "And you do." "I know who they're coming for." She stopped walking. The ground felt cold under her boots despite the last warmth of sunset. "Say it," she murmured. He met her eyes. "They're coming for Nightingale, and they won't leave until she rises or falls." A muscle twitched in her jaw. She hated that call sign. not because it was dangerous, but because it was true, chosen for her, not by her. Nightingale didn't break. Nightingale didn't hesitate. Nightingale didn't feel. She was tired of being Nightingale. Before she could answer, footsteps approached. Light, hesitant, Tanaka. He saluted, then lowered his hand, realizing this wasn't that moment. Master Sergeant, a chow hall asked if you wanted food set aside. They're doing stew. He stopped, reading the tension in the air. His gaze flicked between them. His throat bobbed. You feel it, Eva said softly. He nodded. Everyone does. Then a low whisper, is it happening again? The agent turned slightly, cold appraisal in his gaze, measuring Tanaka, calculating whether he was distraction or asset. Eva stepped forward, blocking the view. You're ready, she told Tanaka, but readiness isn't knowing, it's listening. He swallowed, I'm listening. She rested a hand on his shoulder, unexpected even to her. His posture steadied, breath aligning with hers. Stay alert, she said. Trust your training and trust your team. He nodded once, firm. I won't freeze again. You might, she countered, but you'll move anyway. His eyes widened. That truth hit harder than comfort ever could. He left, not scared, focused. The agent watched her. You're doing it again. What? Caring. She turned away. They're kids. So were we, he murmured. No, she said, we didn't get to be. Silence settled again, thick, heavy, full of unsaid things. Then, a distant thump in the hills, faint, too heavy for wind, too soft for artillery, a signal, a heartbeat from an enemy. The lights on the tower flickered. Voices rose, command radios crackled, boots hit gravel faster now. The storm had arrived. We move, he asked. Not yet. She turned back toward the barracks, not the command post, not to plan, to look at the soldiers she had tried not to lead. They were gathering already, helmets on, plates snug, rifles slung but hands ready, fear on their faces but not panic. Tanaka saw her, and without command, without being told. He nodded. Determination. Not bravado. Not arrogance. Conviction. Say the word, he whispered. She inhaled, long, controlled, the kind of breath soldiers take when they choose their fate willingly. But instead of command, she said something no one expected. Stay alive. Confusion flashed, but understanding followed. Orders tell you what to do, wisdom tells you why. She turned away before emotion surfaced, before they could see the fracture beneath her steel. The agent walked beside her again, matching pace. You love this place, he said softly, these people. She didn't answer. You didn't plan to, he added, but you do. Attachment gets soldiers killed, she whispered. Attachment also saves them. They reached her container. She opened the door. Inside, her rifle rested where she'd left it, her notebook open, her quiet life folded neatly like clothes never worn. The agent stood in the doorway. So who walks out of here tonight? His voice low, reverent. Eva or Nightingale? She froze. Her hand hovered above her rifle. Not fear. Decision. Slowly she lowered her hand away from the weapon, not grabbing it yet, not embracing what it symbolized. I don't know anymore, she said. His eyes softened, not pity, recognition, shared damage. A distant flare burst in the hills, white streak lighting rock and shadow. The base alarms blared. No more time, no more hesitation. She reached for the rifle, fingers curled around cold metal, familiar weight, familiar history. But when she slung it over her shoulder, she felt heavier, not from steel, from responsibility. She stepped into the night. Soldiers turned when they saw her, not with desperation, with belief. And belief is heavier than any weapon. She scanned the horizon, breath slow, eyes sharp. Inside, a quiet war raged. A soldier versus a woman who wanted to be done fighting but couldn't walk away when others would die. "Ready?" the agent asked. "No," she whispered. Then she stepped forward anyway. Because true warriors don't rise when they're prepared. They rise when they're needed. And tonight, the mountains remembered Nightingale, whether she wanted them to or not. What do you fight for when survival isn't enough anymore, and silence can no longer protect you? The first mortar didn't scream the way movies teach you. It thudded, a single, deep heartbeat shuddering the valley floor. Then another. Lights across the base snapped red. Sirens wailed. Soldiers sprinted, boots pounding dust. Radios burst alive, desperate voices cutting through static like fear sharpening into instinct. "Contact East Ridge, incoming fire." Eva moved before thought, not rushing, not panicking, precision carved from years she tried to bury. The night sky pulsed with muzzle flashes on the far ridge, flickers of anger, revenge, and intent. They weren't probing anymore. They were coming. And somewhere in that fire, command wasn't the target. She was. The agent flanked her, rifle up, breathing calm. "We take North Route," he murmured. "No," she answered. "They'll expect Central," he argued. "That's why we go Central." He paused, then nodded. Trust earned in shadows did not fade in open war. They crossed the motor pool, sparks raining from a hit generator, soldiers scrambling to establish fields of fire. Young faces tight with fear, discipline holding them in place. Tanaka spotted her. Relief flickered like a match in darkness, then resolve. "Orders, Master Sergeant." A past life would have given a briefing, coordinated angles, drawn maps in dust. But war rarely honors neat diagrams. "Hold your line," she said. "Don't chase shadows, don't rush glory, survive." "Copy," he breathed, jaw set like a vow. Spears adjusted his grip. Morales exhaled slow. They understood now. Fighting wasn't bravery, staying alive was. Another explosion rolled through the compound, sandbags rippling, windows rattling. A medic cried out somewhere in the smoke. Someone shouted for ammo. Chaos pressed in. Command tents barked orders like dam walls trying to hold back a rising river. Eva walked into it like a woman moving through memory. Each step a quiet surrender to fate she thought she'd escaped. The agent leaned close. "You don't have to be what they think you are." She kept walking. "I never was what they thought I was." He almost smiled. "And yet here you are." They reached the forward barricade. Eva dropped to one knee, eyes calm, scanning ridge lines. She didn't see bullets. She saw intent, angles, rhythm, human desperation wrapped in strategy. "They're funneling," she murmured. "Trying to isolate command?" the agent asked. "No," she whispered, "trying to draw me out." Her chest tightened. Memory surged again. Broken helicopter rotors glinting in moonlight. Hands clawing at her vest, "Don't leave me." Sand soaked in red. Voices calling Nightingale, "We need you." Then silence that lasted years. She shook it off. Emotion kills faster than bullets. The enemy fire paused. That was worse than noise. Moments before death always wait inside silence. She heard it then, faint, distant, but unmistakable, the sharp clack of repositioning metal on rock. Not random, coordinated. "They're shifting to flanking," she said. "They want you moving," the agent replied. "And I will." Before he could protest, she stood, rifle low, movement steady, controlled. He grabbed her arm, first time he'd touched her in years. "You walk into this, maybe you don't walk back." She looked at him not with coldness, but clarity so sharp it cut. "I didn't come here looking to stay." His grip loosened. His voice broke almost imperceptibly. "Eva." But she was already moving. She advanced alone into the courtyard. into open ground where only fools, heroes, or ghosts walk. Bullets snapped near sandbags, dust spat at her boots, but none found her. The world held its breath around her. Enemies on ridge froze. A shadow among them whispered. Recognition traveled faster than sound. Nightingale walked again. Her rifle rose slow, not dramatic, just inevitable. One breath, one shot. A flash on the hillside fell. A pause, panic trembling through the enemy ranks. Another breath. Another shot. Another figure collapsed like regrets falling from memory. She moved like discipline, not fury, each motion a hymn to training, not violence. Behind her, Tanaka watched, eyes wide, not in awe but understanding. "So that's who she is," he whispered. A sudden rocket whooshed, slicing air, aimed straight at her. Tanaka screamed, "Nightingale, move!" For a fraction she froze, hearing her past spoken through a young soldier's throat. But she was Nightingale anymore. She dove, rolled, gravel biting palms, shockwaves slamming her ribs. Breath punched from lungs, but she rose before pain arrived. The agent dragged her behind a barrier, eyes furious. "You almost died for a name you hate." She coughed, dust filling her lungs. "I didn't move because of the name," she gasped. "I froze because I didn't want to live up to it." Understanding flickered in his eyes, grief more than fear. "You can't outrun who you are." She shook her head. "I'm choosing who I am, right now." A scream tore across the base, panic sharp and real. "Medic, we need a medic." "Tanaka." She knew the voice. She'd learned the sound of his fear. Her heart clenched. She sprinted not toward the ridge but toward the sound. At the barracks corner, she found him, Tanaka kneeling over Morales, blood spilling through the young soldier's fingers where shrapnel tore his side. Morales looked up, tears not from pain but fear. "I don't want to die." Eva knelt, not like a warrior, like a human. "You're not dying," she said, voice steady. "You're staying with me." She pressed bandage, gloves red, breath slow, fighting her own shaking. Tanaka trembled. "We need evac." "Breathe," she ordered. He did, matching her pace. Morales whimpered, Did I do good?" Her throat tightened. "You did, brave." His grip found hers, desperate, young, human. "Don't leave me." The same words from another life. Another battlefield. Another soldier she couldn't save. She leaned down, forehead touching Morales gently. "I'm right here, you're not alone." His breathing steadied, not calm but trusting. Trust can hold life together when medicine can't. Medics arrived, took him, carried him. She let go slow, one finger at a time, ritual of release she never mastered. Tanaka wiped tears without shame. "He listened to you. He believed he'd live because you said it." Eva looked toward ridge fires. "I don't want to be who they need." "But you are," he whispered. The agent approached, voice cold again, armor rebuilt. "They're falling back. Whoever sent them knows now you're still alive." "And the soldiers?" she asked. "They think they held the line." She nodded, relief more profound than victory. "Good." He studied her face. "You had a chance to end them. You didn't." "I had a soldier bleeding in my hands." A pause. "I am not here to hunt anymore." His jaw tightened, something like admiration bending into respect deeper than war ever gave. "You chose them over legacy." "No," she said softly, eyes following the medics. "I chose who I want to be." Dawn crept slow, gold brushing razor wire, smoke thinned, the valley exhaled. Command gathered, soldiers limped, some cried quietly, some sat shaking, some prayed. Tanaka returned, cheeks still wet. "Morales is stable. They say he's gonna make it." Eva closed her eyes. Quiet gratitude burned like warmth in frozen ribs. Madson approached, cap in hand, humility raw. "If you want transfer protection, Whatever you need. I want to sign release papers, she cut in. He blinked. Your contract isn't. Not military release, she said. Release from myth. The agent spoke then, gentle like he rarely was. You don't erase a name like Nightingale. I don't need to erase it, she whispered. I just refuse to worship it. He looked at her long, then nodded. Sometimes the bravest act isn't fighting, he said quietly. It's walking away. She cleaned her hands in silence. Dust rose around her boots with each step. The mountains watched, indifferent but ancient witnesses to men and women who came here seeking purpose and left with scars instead. She sat alone by a crater in the earth, morning light breaking through haze, breath steadying, heart raw but beating softer. The notebook lay open, blank page waiting. This time she didn't write a name. She wrote one line. I am allowed to be human. Behind her footsteps Tanaka. He stood quietly, just presence, no salute. Then, what do we do now? She looked at him, not as superior, as someone who'd finally answered her own question. You live, she said. And when fear comes back, breathe through it. Soft, slow, don't fight silence, listen to it. And you, he asked. She looked to horizon, no mission, no orders, just sky wide and waiting. I rest, she whispered. Then I learn how to be someone who doesn't need a battlefield to feel real. Wind tugged her hair, sun warmed her face, no applause, no anthem. Just breath. Just life, fragile, messy, unarmored. Sometimes war doesn't end with explosions. Sometimes it ends with a woman finally setting down a weight she carried too long. And dignity doesn't always march in boots or bleed on foreign soil. Sometimes dignity simply stands up from the dust and walks forward, quiet, human, free, because in the end, sometimes strength does not roar. Sometimes it whispers, I'm still here.